Howdy! In this mini lecture, we will discuss movement of toxic substances in the environment and their effect on the environment. The student learning objectives of this mini lecture are: explain the movement of toxic substances and how they affect organisms and ecosystems, and distinguish between bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Toxic substances affect ecosystems and can have a cascading impact on an ecosystem's composition because there's a chain reaction when one species is adversely affected by a chemical. Thus, toxic chemicals threaten ecosystem function. Toxins concentrate, persist, and travel in the environment in many ways. Chemicals can travel by air. They can impact areas far from the site where the chemical originated. Synthetic chemicals are found globally due to global distillation, which is the global atmospheric circulation of contaminants that moves pollutants to poles. For example, polychlorinated biphenyl, or PCBs, chemicals once used in transformers and other electrical equipment in the U.S. are concentrated in Arctic polar bears, penguins, and some in Greenland due to global distillation. Another example of movement of chemicals is pesticide drift, or the airborne transport of pesticides. Toxins and toxicants can degrade quickly and become harmless, or they may remain unaltered and persist for months, years, or decades in the environment. Rates of degradation depend on the substance's chemistry and on factors like temperature, moisture, and sun exposure. Toxicants that do degrade may break down into simpler products that may be more or less harmful than the original substance. For example, the pesticide DDT degrades into DDE, which is also highly persistent and toxic. So in this case, degradation isn't helpful for the health of the environment. Synthetic chemicals can take many different routes as they travel through the environment. The take-home point from this figure is that you're exposed to low levels of chemicals in nearly all aspects of your life. So it is a good idea to be knowledgeable about what chemicals you could be potentially coming into contact with. In the 1960s, untested pesticides were indiscriminately sprayed with the assumption that they would not harm people. In 1962, Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring and awakened the public to the risks the pesticide DDT posed to people, wildlife, and ecosystems. Largely as a result of Carson's book, DDT was banned in the U.S. in 1973. However, DDT is still made in the U.S. and exported to control diseases transmitted through insects, such as mosquitoes. DDT is considered an excellent solution to the problem of malaria in many developing tropical countries. In these countries, malaria viewed as a greater risk than toxic effects of the pesticide. Some people call this the circle of poison, and that we export DDT to developing nations, and it is then possible that we could import DDT-laden food when we buy agricultural products from these nations. This poses the question, is it unethical for one country to sell others a substance that is deemed toxic? Or would it be unethical for the U.S. not to sell DDT to African nations if they want to use it for controlling malaria? Toxicants can accumulate and biomagnify in the environment. Bioaccumulation is when fat-soluble toxicants build up in animal tissues. This means the animal's tissues has a greater concentration of the chemical than the environment around them. When this happens, the toxicants can travel through the food chain to other organisms. Organisms on all trophic levels bioaccumulate the substance in their tissues. At low trophic levels, the concentration of the contaminant may not be significant. However, the concentration of the contaminant in the bodies of organisms increase at higher trophic levels by the process of biomagnification. Biomagnification is a process by which toxicant concentrations increase at higher trophic levels. For example, as has been mentioned before, DDT was widely used in the 1950s and 1960s. It was banned because it was discovered that it traveled up the food chain and caused reproductive problems. The unhatched offspring of peregrine falcons and bald eagles were dying because DDT was making their eggs too thin and brittle. This caused the near extinction of peregrine falcons and bald eagles. Another example is PCBs in polar bear cubs who get it from their mother's milk. The cubs subsequently suffer immune suppression, hormone disruption, and high mortality. Toxicants threaten ecosystem services, change the composition of ecosystems, and affect how organisms interact with each other and the environment. That concludes the mini lecture on the movement of toxic substances through the environment. Please review the weekly outline and complete the activities for this week per the schedule set forth in the outline. Thanks and gig 'em!